All right.
Good
Hey, everybody.
afternoon, good morning, good evening. We already have a worldwide audience joining in with us here on Friday, January 31st, 2025. Want to welcome everybody to 365 Deep Dive. He's John Moore. I'm Andy Honeycutt, and today we've got a special guest joining us. He's right up the road from me, not far on the other side of the country. But we've got Daniel Christian joining us for our discussion on agents, Copilot Agents, M365 Copilot Agents. This is going to be a really fun show. I want to welcome everybody that's joining in with us. Guys, how are we doing?
Good, man. It's been a heck of a week. It's been really, really busy at work. And, we had a couple nice days here in Kansas City, but now it's raining. It's going to rain all weekend. I've got Pinewood Derbies coming up for Cub Scouts this weekend. I got to live stream that. So it's just a lot.
But it's not all rainy days for those of you in Kansas City because your Chiefs are headed to the Super Bowl where they'll be facing off
That's right.
for the second time in 3 years with the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's something bright on the horizon for you. Daniel, what's new with you, man?
I'm just glad it's Friday. It has been a long week, and I'm playing so many different roles. I've had kids who are not feeling well. I've had work deadlines to meet. I mean, this is what really makes it. We build agents for stuff, but what about agents for your day-to-day life needs? All right, can we have some of those? I wouldn't mind even building it. I need an agent for stuff like that.
I heard that's in wave 2. Well, coming later this year for Copilot.
And the name will change, I guess. I don't know what.
Man.
Well, this
Speaking of name changes, you want to jump in on that, Andy? And we had a name change this month, which has been exhausting me, like new icons and all that stuff.
So speaking of change, let me just get my screens aligned here as we're moving things here and there and everywhere. All right, so name change, and I don't even know where to begin with this.
Yeah, so I mean, Microsoft announced,
and we can talk about
Microsoft announced the new Copilot chat, as if the thing you weren't already using was called Copilot and was a chat. So it caused a little bit of confusion. Some people are like, saying that, hey, it actually aligns and makes more sense. But essentially it's Microsoft kind of, you feel like they're kind of honing in on what the brand is going to be, right? From Bing Chat 2 years ago to now we're kind of settled on it's Copilot Chat, whether, it's just Copilot Chat or your Microsoft 365 Copilot, which Andy's showing on the screen right here. And he could probably explain a little bit of, the differences and, how that arrives at us talking about agents, because part of it is agents are more available with this new announcement.
Yeah, exactly. So full disclosure, I've always called it Copilot Chat. It was Bing Chat for like a hot minute, but as soon as they put Copilot on it, this was Copilot Chat for me. There's been there was Copilot Chat with graph grounded data. That's like Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007. That's way too long for anybody. So I would just call it Copilot Chat. At one point it was Biz Chat, and then it changed to Copilot Chat with consumer protected data, and then it was Biz Chat for 2 weeks, and then it's Copilot Chat again. I've always called it Copilot Chat. Copilot Chat is what we see on the screen. It's the virtual chat experience. For those of you that are coming from the ChatGPT world, this is the equivalent of ChatGPT, but I think Copilot does some things that you can't get with that other application. We're going to be able, for licensed users, connect to our Microsoft 365 cloud data, information stored in Outlook, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, and more. And then you have the ability to interact with it based off of its training data, but it also has the ability to search the web and find and work with unique content. On the other side of the house, for the non-Microsoft 365 licensed users, they're going to have a Copilot chat experience, which they technically had for quite a while. Some of the functionality was rolled back in October of last year. It's been added and even updated in some places for those non-licensed users. They are still working underneath enterprise data protection, provided they're logged in with a tool or work account. But they're going to be able to have a Copilot chat experience in the non-licensed world, where they can still interact with web searching, they can still interact with the training data, and as part of the announcements we got over the last couple of weeks, they're going to be able to work with agents. And that's where we wanted to kind of talk today, was about agents. Agents are not going to be just for licensed users, but we're going to be able to potentially work with agents for non-licensed users as well. No one, I think, has a crystal clear understanding of that licensing, but we're going to try and walk through it here today. That's why we got Daniel on the show, because he's got all the info that we need there.
So this pretty much sums up my thoughts. Is it's like we're just renaming and moving things around, but like as Andy stated, to share his screen again, now under that web tab, or your availability for, you don't want to pay the $30 a month, but you're going to use what used to be Bing Chat Enterprise, what used to be business chat with work grounded, or with enterprise data protection, that one that is included with your e-licensing. And now you'll be able to expose your declarative agents, or your M365 Copilot agents, to that chat using a pay-as-you-go model. And that's why we're super excited to have Daniel here, because he has kind of sleuthed all of the information about how that's going to work, what the messages, the count of messages, and all of that type of stuff is going to look like as we start like designing what our environment is going to look like, where we've got some people with Copilot licenses, some people using just the included Copilot chat, people using agents in both of those worlds, and all of that. But I guess to start at the ground level, Andy, you want to start with like what, or Daniel, if you want to define what Copilot agents are, and like how is that different from what we've been doing with like prompt engineering and things like that? Who wants to take the task of trying to explain what the heck an agent is?
I'll do it. I'll jump into that one.
Okay.
Let's take a look at a prompt first. For example, we got this prompt in the center of the screen here: going on holiday. Write some funny out of office email responses to use while I'm going on vacation from, and then it's got some placeholder dates. When you prompt, you're giving a request to Copilot. You're asking it to do something. And the better prompts tend to have 4 key criteria. They have a goal, they have expectations, they have context, and they have a source. When you provide those 4 criteria, you get a better prompt. So if I were to ask Copilot, what are the capabilities of M365 Copilot? That's a prompt. That's a very broad prompt, and it has a very large scope. And there's all kinds of different ways that you could respond to that. So a better way to do something like that would be through prompt engineering. What are the capabilities of Microsoft 365 Copilot for a licensed user? And we're going to say specifically in Microsoft Teams meetings. What I've done is I've given it more context. I've given it more expectations. I've narrowed down the scope of what the results are. And that's called prompt engineering. We're giving it an ask. John's often used the example of asking the 5-year-old to unload the dishwasher. If you're not explicit in not only what to unload, but where to place it, the dishes could end up literally anywhere, including back in the dishwasher. And Copilot's very much the same. So when we give it goal, context, expectations, and source, we get better results out of it. Over time, though, remembering exactly what you asked it, or what that prompt was that was really great becomes a manual effort. You have to save the prompt. You have to copy the prompt. You have to retrieve the prompt to use it. And Microsoft has given us the ability now to go in and take a prompt and save it. And when we save that, we're able to give it a name. So like I might call this, you see I'm running out of characters there, but Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then I've saved that as a prompt. And now it's available through the prompt gallery, which would allow me to go and view prompts. I can go to my prompts, and then there's that prompt, and I can recall it, and I can get back to it. So it's simplifying some of the prompt engineering, make it more repeatable. They've also given us the ability to take a prompt and now share that. So copy the link to the prompt, and then I can share that with someone else in the organization, and now they can reuse a prompt that maybe I've worked on. But when they reuse it, they can append it or iterate on it to get the results that are going to work for them. So it's given us a mechanism to be able to start sharing prompts. And the prompt gallery, it looks like they have an app that is in preview. It's coming, where we're going to be able to discover, share, and save prompts within the organization. And that's going to address a big need. And John and I have done a deep dive on that in the past, different ways that we like to save and share prompts. I like Loop workspaces. Microsoft Lists are also good. We've talked about Prompt Buddy. There's a few different tools that are out there. But in the context of prompt engineering, sometimes we just want to apply a prompt to a process. And when we work with processes, we want it to be standard and we want it to be consistent. We want to have a repeatable outcome that anyone on our team can run and we can plug and play. And that's where agents come into play. We're going to deep dive into agents in just a little bit, but let's say I go and create an agent. And I'm going to go behind the scenes. I'm not going to describe it. I'm going to go behind the scenes and let's talk about what we can do when we create an agent. We can give the agent a name and a description. The description states like the use case or the goal, not only for us, but to Copilot. This is what this agent is designed to do. This is its role. Then we can give it specific instructions. That allows us to fine-tune the behavior and the output so that we do get a consistent result each and every time that we want to work with this particular agent. It's a little bit of prompt engineering. There's a little bit of testing that you're going to want to do on top of that, but it's going to allow us to define a set of instructions and append those instructions down the road if parameters change. So we're defining the role and the instructions. An agent's also going to allow us to do things like define the knowledge source. So when I do a prompt, I can say, well, I want you to reference these documents, and I can add content to the prompt. Well, here, the user doesn't necessarily have to know which documents to reference. I can predefine that for them, and I can do that through a number of different sources, 20 sources. It could be 20 URLs, 20 SharePoint sites, 20 document libraries, 20 folders, or 20 specific documents. And it can be a mix and a match. I can say, here's one SharePoint site and 20 separate documents, or here's 10 documents and 10 folders that I want you to focus in on, or just use these 10 files. So I can narrow down the scope or the context and the source that I actually want it to work with. In the future, we're going to see the ability to add actions to this. Actions are going to allow Copilot to complete tasks and add capabilities to what you're actually doing. There are things like allowing it to work with code and to generate images. And then we can generate the starter prompts, those big tiles that we actually see when we go and we start to interact with an agent. So by creating an agent, we're taking some of the guesswork out of the prompt engineering. We're taking some of the skill out of prompt engineering. And now we're kind of democratizing that so that one person with some skills can build this and their whole team would actually be able to take advantage of it. And we can plug it into a business process, and then we get consistency in that process. We kind of standardize it a little bit. We can ground it on the data that we need, and we can provide a great experience for people across the organization. Now, there's a question out there I can see. Can we get repeatable responses to the same prompt if we ask Copilot to fix a seed number associated with that response? I haven't seen anything related to seed numbers in Copilot. That would be more like what I would do if I were working with, like I do that. I see that in Midjourney a good bit. This is going to kind of, using agents is going to kind of give us a similar type experience versus trying to, well, work with the seed number, for instance. So we're working within the capabilities of Copilot, and one, referencing a specific seed number is not within the capabilities that we have, at least on the non-developer side over here. Now, what that agent is going to allow us to do, though, is to have a user go into Copilot chat like we are here, select an agent, and then that agent has starter prompts for them to begin their journey on. But on the back end, that description is defining the role. In this case, it's an idea coach. It's going to brainstorm about ideas and topics to help us to ideate. And then it's going to have a specific set of instructions that it needs to fall in line with. That's my definition of an agent. If anybody has anything they'd like to add to that, I'd love to hear.
I don't know, John, you just asked a simple question, but Andy kind of explained the whole thing. So I just feel like we should say, that's it, folks. The show is over.
Yeah, right.
You know? You got everything. Andy just got the whole explanation done.
Yeah. No, I think one way, so I like to think in analogies, right? I have trouble processing technical information just with like, here's what it is. So let me give you a parable or an analogy in a way. I view prompting and prompt engineering. So a prompt engineering is just writing a better instruction or a better question for your large language model. It's just writing a better one. And I view these prompts and saving your prompts into a prompt library. It's kind of like writing down some killer tip or a killer, like, hey, this is the same 5 things I need to do to log my expense report. You write that stuff down on a bunch of sticky notes, and they're like all over your monitor. Here's the stuff that, you want to not forget. And you pull the sticky note down, and that's what you need right now in the moment. Those are kind of like your collection of prompts, and maybe you get smart about it. You take all those sticky notes, you put them into a notebook, and that's like your prompt gallery or your prompt library. When you graduate to an agent, it's like taking that instruction set where you're like, hey, this is the way that I talk to my boss, right? I speak in a formal tone. When he asks for an update, I give a summary of the project, bullets of what we've done, bullets of what we're going to do, and challenges that we're running into. I give him that same format every time. So what I want to do is I would take that prompt, rather than having to remember or save all the context of how I want that format and everything. You could put that into the agent builder like Andy showed, and those become custom instructions. Hey, agent, when I interact with you, I want you to always respond with these 3 sections. I want bullet points in this section. I want a table in that section. I want it to be a certain format every time. I want you to use this tone. I want you to use this kind of language. That's custom instructions. On top of that, you get custom knowledge. So I want you to look at these specific sites, these specific files of information, so that you're very well informed on what your subject matter expertise is. And then as we move more towards the advanced side, we'll be able to use custom actions, so that rather than just formatting and giving me text, maybe it would update a ServiceNow ticket, or it would do something deep in an application, and it would actually take action rather than just giving me textual output and then I go do something with it. That's kind of how I view Copilot agents, is like, rather than a prompt, which is nice when I need to grab it off the shelf and use it really quickly, it's more like I want to embed how that thing behaves into a configuration, so that I can just quickly mention that thing, and it already knows how it should talk to me. It already knows how it should respond and where it should get its data from. So that's one way I see it.
Yeah, my definition of agents actually changed over the period of time, at least in the last 1 year. Because at one time when I initially saw agents coming in, I literally said, oh, this is just a very enhanced search option. But then when I thought about it, I said, you know what, it's actually not, because it's doing so much more than that. Yes, in some effect, it is searching for your information, using the existing content sources, aka knowledge, that you're providing, but it goes ahead and provides all that information back to you in a very concise way, in a very personalized way. That's where the tone comes in, what John was talking about. That's where very specific answers that you're looking for, what Andy just showed, comes in. But then there is also the concept of it using its AI generative pieces that, hey, I'm just going to take everything you're saying, I'm going to process that for you, I'm going to use the information that you told me to access, and then I'll get all of that back in a concise way. So when I thought through all of that, and I spent a lot of time thinking about that, I now challenge anybody who says that, hey, this is just an enhanced search. I say, no, this is way more than that. This is way more than that. We've gone past that station of, this is just a search thing, way past that. And so it helps when, it's almost sounds like a sale pitch. I see that slide again and again, but there is some meaning to it, is that these agents are the UI for the AI. It is our one step in to understand, okay, I want to touch the AI in the back end to do all its stuff with my knowledge, but then present that to me in a way that makes sense to me. So it does sound a little salesy, that UI for the AI, but if you really sit down and process it, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like that way of looking at it too. It's, I guess, suffice it to say, like, it can be different things to different people as we're all trying to define it for ourselves. Some people they see it like what Daniel said initially, for like, rather than boiling the ocean and all this overshared documentation, I'm going to funnel it down. And I know that it's coming from these 3 sites. That's one way, like, you're scratching the surface. And then my way of like, oh, it's custom instructions, so I don't have to like tell it every time to be polite to me. That's just scratching the surface. But when you put these components together, overall, that's the agent itself. And it's kind of that front end for what you would have had to do manually just with prompt engineering. Now, Andy, there was, I guess, as we get started with agents, Microsoft, I think, has kind of anticipated the fact that people aren't going to know what agents are and what they want from agents. So it's been pretty nice that Microsoft actually published a bunch of agent templates, or out of the box agents. Do you want to kind of show what those are? And like, hopefully those would like inspire people to understand kind of the art of the possible with agents as they go into building their own. I found that, like, everybody at my organization, they want to talk about agents because it's like the buzzword right now. And like, dude, I tell you what, I never heard the word agentic until like 6 or 8 months ago. And now all of a sudden everybody's like got it in their like LinkedIn byline, like agentic this and that, like they always talk that way. And it's a bunch of nonsense. So like, I have the feeling that they're kind of overblown, the whole idea of agents. I think people don't really know what they want to do with them. And I'm hoping that maybe by looking at the ones Microsoft made out of the box, we can maybe understand a little bit more of like, why would I want to make an agent and what it would do for me? Right.
So I'll start with one that was initially available for everybody. And it's a pretty powerful one. That's the Visual Creator. I have a number. If you look on my screen in the upper right hand corner, I've got Copilot highlighted, but underneath that I have agents, and there's a few listed, and there's the get or create the agent down below. But Visual Creator is kind of a default one. Notice, like, when I hover over that, there's no pin option. When I hover over the additional agents, there's an option to pin, which means the Visual Creator is basically deployed for everyone. And admins do have some controls to turn it off, but the Visual Creator, its role, its responsibility within the organization is to help you to generate images using artificial intelligence. So through natural language, you can describe a hyper realistic image of a modern workspace with colorful furniture and a moss wall in a mid-morning light. And it's going to take what description that you put into that prompt editor, and it's going to generate an image using DALL-E 3 on the back end. And it's going to output an image for you. And you could go and append that using Microsoft Designer. That's the most basic agent that we have. So define the role. The purpose of this agent is to create images, and you can prompt against that to get a better result. But the instructions are going to tell it, generate an image based off of the instructions that the person provides, the user provides, and then you can see we've got exactly what we described, a hyper realistic image of a modern workspace with vibrant, colorful furniture, a lush moss wall, soft mid-morning light streaming through the large windows. No offense, this looks like the Apple campus. I don't know, it looks like the spaceship headquarters, but
Looks like a nice place to work.
They were going for. But that's the first agent. So that's the first one I would encourage people to play with, is the visual creator, because that's typically deployed by for most users in the organization. So from there, you see I have a number of other agents, and they're called coaches in this case. There's prompt coach, idea coach, career coach, learning coach, writing coach. How did I get those? Great question. Well, if I go down here to get agents, what that's going to do is redirect me to the apps store. And then through the app store, you can see it's already filtered down to the agents category. And there's a few there from the third-party providers. Depending on your work environment, you may or may not see those. But if you go to the Built by Microsoft section, you'll see there's a few apps and services that are built by Microsoft. There's still no coaches. What I found is that if you go and you actually search for the word coach, then the coaches show up in the listing of all the apps that are there. And so you hover over one of these, you find the one that you're looking for, and then you have the ability to, in some cases, get, add, or open. I've already got this coach. I've already added it. So for me, it's just a simple open option. But you would go through each one of them that you're looking for, and then, or you want to add, and you can get these default agents from Microsoft. Now, when we get the default agents, it's going to add it to Copilot Biz Chat, Copilot Chat. So I go back into Copilot Chat, and then my agents actually show up over here. Now, I've pinned them because they typically show up below the horizontal rule, and you pin them, and then they're always available up at the top. You have the option to uninstall or unpin them if you want. I just like to pin them and keep them up there. And then when you need to interact with that agent, you simply click on it. So let's say I want to use the prompt coach. And before I even do that, I'm going to go back over here, and I'm just going to copy this prompt. So I'm going to go to prompt coach now. And so now I'm in prompt coach, and you can see this agent has some starter prompts to give us some suggestions of use case and what we can do with it. But it's got its role and it's got its instructions on the back end. So it has a specific defined job that it's going to do. And in this case, this one is about prompt engineering. How do I write a better prompt? So I'm going to take that prompt from before that we just used for the image, and I'm going to send that to prompt coach. And now prompt coach is going to give me its feedback. And it says, I understand you're looking to create a prompt for generating a hyper realistic image, but notice that what it gives me in return: goal, context, source, and expectations. The things that I talked about that are good practices for creating a prompt. And so it's asking me, what's the main purpose of this image? Is it for presentation or for marketing material? And so I can have a conversation with it, and I could say presentation. And then the next question, can you provide any background information or the reason for this request? So it gives me an example. There's a specific theme or style you're looking for. I'm going to say mid-century, I'm going to spell that correctly, modern workplace. And then it's going to say, all right, so I've answered two of those things. Now it's still asking me, well, you haven't given me the source or the expectations yet. So we're going to go, and then we're going to tell it the source. Are there any specific sources or examples that you want to be considered? For instance, any images or styles that you have in mind. I can't remember the name of the movie. I just drew a blank. Tomorrowland. That's it. I'm
surprised Andy didn't say Iron
Tomorrowland movie. And then
he said mid-century. I was just thinking like Mad Men.
And then lastly, how do you expect the image to be formatted or structured? Are there any particular details, colors, or lighting? expectations, colors, shades of blue and green. All right, now I've given it answers to those questions. And so what it's going to do is recreate that prompt for me. And it's appended that. And clearly the prompt is much better, possibly. So we're going to just take
It's
that.
definitely bigger.
Yeah.
Definitely bigger. But we're going to take that and let's go and let's compare that to the previous outcome. So we'll go and send this to the visual creator, and we'll let it go through and generate, and we're going to see how it appends and updates that image for us, and if it meets the criteria that I want. But while it's doing that, the purpose of Prompt Coach was to create a better prompt using what Microsoft has defined as prompt engineering guidelines, and that's the goal, the expectations, the context, and the source. And so we can go and kind of look and compare between the two. So like this one kind of jumps out. This was the first one we looked at. Kind of reminded me of the Apple spaceship. And then we go down here, and it's definitely leaned in to more of the colors and the tones that I was looking for. I see some elements of kind of a 1950-ish vibe with the light fixtures that are coming down. Look at some of the
lots
furniture.
of plants giving you the greens.
Yeah. And so, you know, this is an image. It's up for, you know, your opinion, whether it actually improved that or not. But as you start working with like other prompts, you'll see that this is a great way to learn how to prompt and to take something basic and to turn it into something more specific. And an agent gave us that capability. And then there are other coaches or agents that we can work with. There's like the idea coach is for brainstorming and ideation. There's the career coach, where you can develop a career development plan and you can have it act as kind of that career HR counselor and provide you feedback, or maybe help you to define a process for the courses, certifications that you want to use to potentially improve your career, or even a resume coach. There's a learning coach. I'm a big fan of this one. Help me learn something new. And you can suggest like a topic, and then it'll act like a tutor. So help me learn about a specific topic. Well, topic in this case, help me learn about, I'm going to say prompt engineering. And I'm going to give it some more context. And I'm going to say for M365 Copilot, so that it narrows down the scope a little bit and it knows kind of what I'm working with versus all the Gen AI tools that are out there. And because of the instructions can inform it how to respond back to you through a dialogue. And I think that's really where it separates itself from just prompt engineering. The instructions say, okay, number one, this is the person's ask. Now what? It tells it how to respond to you. What's the initial response going to be? Then based off of the topic, it might have guidelines how to respond to you, the format, create a brief outline or an overview to respond back to the person. From there, it might tell it to summarize the bullet points that it's created. That would be an instruction. And then it might end its set of instructions with leave an open-ended question for next steps to interact and continue the dialogue with the person. And that's what the instructions can do. It can determine how the agent reacts to you and how the agent interacts with you. And unless you put that specifically in a prompt, say, for example, you are my learning coach. You're going to teach me about prompt engineering. You're going to provide an outline of topics for us to cover. We're going to cover this one section at a time. After each section, you're going to ask me for if I'm ready to move on to the next section or if I need to review. I would do that in a single prompt. Well, here in the agent, I've made it so that I can plug and play any topic into this scenario. Teach me about this thing. And the instructions are give a warm greeting, create the outline, move through it one section at a time, and then ask review questions and interact with the user and ask them if they're ready to move on. And that makes it repeatable. And I think that's really what separates it from prompt engineering. So those are a few of the out-of-the-box coaches that are there. I would definitely encourage you to explore these. They're really fascinating to kind of learn how Copilot is thinking, so to speak. and how to engage with it.
Yeah.
Have either of you worked with either of the or any of the coaches?
I have it, and it's actually gotten a little easier. So,
Mhm.
Andy, you see on your screen there, instead of going to get agents, if you just click on create an agent,
Mhm.
right now on the left, it'll actually show you, hey, you can build one,
Yeah.
or you can try these. So those templates show up over here now. Makes it a
Yeah.
lot easier to find them.
I think that's kind of the next step, Daniel, is like if I steal the screen here. So what you guys might be thinking as you watch this is like, okay, Andy's talking about like it's got instructions and it's like it's pre-built, it's out of the box. So what you might be thinking is like, okay, well, I want to make my own agent. How do I get those instructions? So I asked it like, what are your instructions? And it just kind of told me like basically a description about itself, like, hey, I help you create better prompts, things like that. And it just wants me to like interact with it. However, if you do what Daniel said, try hitting create an agent and you're like, man, I really like the way that prompt coach works, but I want it to behave a little bit differently. Let's click on prompt coach and it starts that as a template.
Mhm.
Now that I've got that template loaded up, let's go right here to the configure tab in the middle and check this out. There's all of the custom instructions written by Microsoft.
Mhm.
So you can see now you're kind of starting to get like the schema that they used, right? So they've got like a section with the purpose, a section with like what the agent's goals are, a section about the direction, right? Don't overwhelm them with multiple questions. Ask clarifying questions when you need it. Use responsible AI guidelines. Don't help somebody, like build a explosion or something like that. So there's like some of its instructions, and now I could go in and I could kind of tweak that a little bit to work the way my company wants to teach people how to prompt. Or you see there's no knowledge right here, but maybe my organization, maybe we put together like a whole course about prompt engineering and building better prompts and doing it the Contoso way. Maybe what I want to do is I want to upload the slide deck from that presentation, or maybe it's on a SharePoint site in a page. So I just point it to the SharePoint site and say, this is the way we do prompts at Contoso. So that's where you can take the out of the box one, use it as inspiration to understand how do I write good instructions? How do I customize it for my company so that I don't do the Microsoft prompt coach. Maybe I do the Contoso prompt coach. It's got some different instructions, but that's one way that you can start building your agents and basically kind of look at like how do the people who made agents a thing, how do they write custom instructions? And it can really kind of inform you.
Yeah, I'm more on the techie side. I love to actually build these agents. One of the
Yeah.
things I like Johnny many emphasized on that was those 3 or 4 templates that are there. That is a great one for learning by reverse engineering. Just like we built from templates and building apps and flows. I've learned so much from those templates. Same thing over here, because now if you build your own custom agents from scratch in Copilot Studio, take ideas from here, like how they've gone ahead and added the instructions. It is interesting that in the pilot coach one over here, it's got the asterisk one. See over here, yeah. So it had the hashtags one. Over here,
Yeah.
this is asterisks.
They
So
wrote it in Markdown. Yeah.
yeah, in Markdown mode. Actually, what I was
Yeah.
going to say is so it different formats work, but just going ahead and playing with these templates, do it for the sake of reverse engineering. So you get ideas on
Yeah.
how to write good instructions. So when you're ready to build your own custom agents, you've got at least something to work with.
Yeah. So the next thing we had on the list, guys, was the idea of SharePoint agents. Do we want to go run and do a detour over there to kind of show like the other easy mode before we get into Copilot Studio?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think
then
that's a good
Daniel
idea.
can take the training wheels off, so to say. Okay, cool. I'll go ahead and jump into SharePoint agents because we've deployed these at my organization. We've got people, building SharePoint agents, and I built an interesting one that I kind of wanted to demo and talk about. So SharePoint agents is an interesting concept. If you go into SharePoint, you could create an agent about a SharePoint site or a document library. So if I go into the communication site here for our fake environment, and I open up Copilot right up here in the top corner, click that Copilot option. Now you've got a site agent right here on the right-hand side. What this is it's a SharePoint agent, and it's a what they call ready-to-use agent. So it is grounded in this particular site. So there's the document library, the pages that are on the site, things like that. So you could say like, create an FAQ about all the docs on the site, or, summarize the key highlights on this page that I'm looking at right now. So that's great. You've got like this out of the box type of an experience, but you can also create a SharePoint agent specifically. So if you go into like the documents folder, and you've got like these documents that you want to create an agent specifically about, you can create what's called a custom SharePoint agent for your site. And that's the button at the top right there. So I'm going to click on that and it creates a documents agent. Okay, great. That's not super helpful. So I'm going to click the edit button right here and kind of get into it. And like, maybe this is like, an inclusivity expert, right? Because I've got these two documents are about like accessible design. And then I go into the sources and it's looking at the documents folder. Like Andy showed, you can pick up to 20 different things. So I could specifically pick these two documents and say, this is how we do accessible design. I could remove the whole folder if I wanted to, but I can add up to 20 sources. So that is, a bunch of SharePoint sites, a bunch of documents, a bunch of folders or document libraries. And then the behavior, again, you've got those custom instructions right here, and you've got some starter prompts if you want to kind of like encourage people, these with some like starter prompts. So what I did is I've created an agent on our other SharePoint site here. I had this idea at my company. We're getting ready to promote Neurodiversity Awareness Week in March. And I've got this idea, like, wouldn't it be cool to think in terms of an agent? And a lot of people, they're looking at SharePoint agents right now as a way to basically ground their data in their SharePoint, right? But I was thinking like, how could an agent assist somebody? And one way is, what if we built an agent that assists a content creator in looking at their content and seeing like, is this accessible for people with neurodiversities, dyslexia, autism spectrum, ADHD, anxiety? So I've created an agent called the Neurodiversity Checker. And if we go in and we edit that agent, you can see that under the sources, it's grounded in this particular SharePoint site. And the behavior, I wrote some custom instructions that aren't as impressive as what Microsoft wrote, but I'll zoom in here a little bit. That is basically like, hey, you're going to be an expert on neurodiversity accessibility. I want you to help people assess their content. And what I want you to do is I want you to score it, right? Look at different types of neurodiversities. And I want you to try to figure out a score between 1 and 10 to rate what their content looks like, and some things that they could do to help, like accessibility and write their stuff a little bit differently to accommodate others. Be very encouraging. Be thankful. Encourage the person. Like, it's great that you're thinking about accessibility. You should feel good about yourself. Things like that. So I created that agent, and it's available on the SharePoint site. What you would do is you're basically going from a like draft type of mode in here. If I click the drop down, this like test agent, that's like in draft. What you would do is when you're ready to show that agent to other people on the site, you would click the dots and you would write about down in here somewhere. It would say approve, or set as approved. That would set it as like a published agent so people can use it on the site. And you can also replace the default agent with the custom agent by clicking set as site default. But this neurodiversity checker, I have a few things here where it's like, can you provide an accessibility score for this content? And then I can click the attach button and I could point to like a PowerPoint slide deck that is on this SharePoint site and say, all right, let's check out this slide deck that I've been created. I want to make sure it's accessible for people with neurodiversity. And it's like jumping because it's doing that. So
Because it's so
you can say that
excited
like,
about the use
right?
case.
It was like, yay. But it came back and it did exactly what the custom instructions said, which is here's your table. For dyslexia, it's a 3, ADHD, it's a 2. You know, here's the score. And it tells me why. Hey, here's some good things that you're doing. Like you're using short phrases, which is good for dyslexia. You know, it's organized and you got good headings. But you know, maybe you should switch your font to Open Dyslexic or Arial because that's easier to read for people with dyslexia. Don't use italics because that can be kind of hard for people with dyslexia. You know, for people on the autism spectrum, you know, you've got some good things here. You got a good logical flow, but you know, maybe stop using metaphors. You know, be a little bit more literal about how you explain concepts, things like that. So there's some like areas improvement and strengths, and you know, it's looking at my slide deck and giving me some feedback on it. So that's one example of kind of breaking out of the I just want to use this as like a fancy search tool, like what you talked about, Daniel, and being like, how can I make it like a helper, or like make it do a job rather than just finding stuff for me. So all of this though, all of these like doing agent builder, using templates, doing a SharePoint agent, I kind of feel like that's baby stuff compared to what Daniel knows, which is Copilot Studio. And at any point when you're in here and you're editing your agent, you might have noticed that if I go right here, see how it says customize this in Copilot Studio and add advanced customization for Copilot Studio? That's where we like, all right, I'm doing like the easy stuff, and that's where me and Andy kind of live. Let's talk about going into like Copilot Studio, where you've got all of the tools available to you. Go ahead, Andy.
Just briefly, before we dive headfirst into Copilot Studio, there is one more agent that we need to briefly mention, and if you could just bring me back up on the screen. Man. So, excuse me, a little under the weather. I'm gonna head over to Teams for a moment, and in the background, throughout this entire presentation, we've had a Teams meeting running between John and I. And this Teams meeting is using an agent that is in preview right now, and that's Facilitator. Facilitator agent is specific for Teams meeting notes, but also for Teams chat conversations. And in this case, you can see Facilitator is busy at work.
Yeah.
Filling
Hands
out.
up. We're not typing right now. Facilitator's typing.
Yep. And it's doing that based off of the transcription for this meeting. The way that the Facilitator actually works is when you are in Microsoft Teams, and I do want to preface that this is currently a feature that is in preview. So in your Teams client, you would need to be in private preview, public preview, early release for this. And then when you go to schedule a meeting, one of the options that you're going to see is generate or AI generated notes. Now you can turn this on when you schedule the meeting, but you can also turn it on while the meeting is actually in progress. And then from there, when you go into your meeting and you open up notes, you'll notice that it has kind of the Copilot sparkles, the magic sparkles, the magic pixie dust. And you'll see that in the notes as well when you open that up. And it will generate those notes for you in real time as the meeting's going. So you can be present in the meeting. You can keep this open to the side and quickly view like a recap. And then after the meeting is over, you don't necessarily have to go back and spend even 15 minutes invoking Copilot, asking for meeting notes and action items and takeaways, it's already done. So when the meeting is done, then you can go back and you can spend your time scrubbing through it, cleaning it up, identifying action items, and you'll see where things were. And in this case, like, it's created a follow-up task. It says Andy's going to turn the facilitator feature on in the meeting. Well, I don't need to sync that as a task. I can actually delete that one. But there might be other things, like Daniel's going to provide information on how the licensing works. That's a task that it's assumed that we would want to assign to Daniel. And so I'm going to be able to quickly review the notes and get faster turnaround, even on the meeting notes. And this is even faster than going into Copilot and asking it to generate meeting notes and waiting for all that to happen. Now they're done, and they happen in
Yeah,
real
it's just
time.
doing it on the fly. And a quick, like, a fun tip that you could use in bar trivia sometime is how often does that update? I've gotten that question before, and Microsoft shared with us that it basically, the facilitator looks at the changes every 4 minutes. So you'll notice that, like, it'll start typing. It's about every 4 minutes. If it's not typing right now, don't worry, it'll do it in a little bit. So
I was going to guess 2, but I'm
yeah.
glad to know
No,
that it's
apparently their
approximately 4.
research, apparently
Yeah.
enough changes every 4 minutes that's what their update frequency is.
All right.
So
So let's take advantage of the time that we have with our good friend Daniel, and let's dive a little bit deeper into this topic. So we're going to
yeah.
transition from creating agents in Copilot Chat, creating agents in Copilot Studio, and we're going to talk about what happens when we need to go further. What happens when we need to take this thing that we're working on and edit it beyond the capabilities that are here. And so that's where we're going to transition over to Copilot Studio. So let's turn it over to Daniel.
Yeah, man.
Wow, they put the load on me for sure. Okay. No, I feel like
Yeah, let me bring your screen up.
I still am learning as we're going along, and just when I thought I knew something, something changes. So, but
It's hard to keep up, man.
I know. Well, what I wanted to do was actually just start a little bit by explaining the breakdown of this Microsoft 365 Copilot, because after that, it'll start to make sense where the Copilot agent falls into this entire Copilot realm. So for all this time, we knew that, okay, it was a Microsoft 365 Copilot, and it's $30 per user per month. But recently, when that announcement came up about all these announcements about the agents, this section on the right, that is what helped me understand what all comes along with this $30. Because now there's the Copilot chat, the one we just demonstrated and talked all about. That part is free. Free if you've got your Microsoft 365 Enterprise license, if you've got your business license, it will come along with that. But then you also get all these other features, which is right below the plus. You get the chat, which is work grounded. You get Copilot Microsoft 365 apps, agents, and then the control system and the control analytics. The agents piece also falls into that. So this was a big one for me. In fact, there was just a quick slide that showed up, but it had a big light bulb moment on me because I finally understood what all this $30 comes up with. So the $30 versus the free one, this was the good breakdown slide as well. I spent a lot of time looking at this. I had a lot more questions after this too, but at least now we have a good understanding of this, breakdown over here. So anything which is on these dots, that's included whether you're going on the free side, which is the Microsoft 365 chat, or it is going in with your Microsoft 365 Copilot, then you've got more of these things. Now, my purpose over here is not about the dollar amounts and about the consumption and everything. But in this section right now, this presentation, I just want to show you what comes along with it. And we can have more conversations later on about, if this, then that, or what these situations and breakdowns and consumptions. I've actually done detailed videos on my channel doing breakdowns, and we'll actually talk a few about that. And then you decide what's the right. I'll give you some suggestions, but I'll help you decide that. Things which catch people's attention now is the metered one. So if you are going down any one of these paths, And if you are going down the path where, okay, for example, if I want to go ahead and now use these agents independently across, something called as autonomous actions, things which, run in the back end, automatically running in, autonomously running in, well, then there's an additional cost to it. Well, we didn't know all of these things, but now we do. So regardless of how your reaction is to this, at least the common denominator between all of us is that, hey, now we know. Now we know. And that was my positive side of this. So I want to at least, leave it in that positive note. So let's talk a little bit about the Copilot Studio just to build on all of that. First of all was the licensing pieces and the new features. Big one over here, John and Andy, that caught my attention was finally we got the pay-as-you-go. 1 cent per message. Pay-as-you-go was huge. And you hear me talk about that a lot. Because we already knew what the message packs was. Message packs was 20 per tenant per month. This is pure doing building your own custom tenant agents. And then you've got these agent options. You've got the Copilot Studio in Microsoft 365, which is the $30 per user per month. Now, there were a lot of features that was announced, but the 3 big ones was the web grounded answers, tenant graph grounding for messages, and the autonomous actions. So we will take a look at a few of these concepts. But first, I want you to understand, what this. Anytime you hear licenses, you will hear the term messages now. For example, the Copilot Studio one, it's 25,000 messages. Well, what does that mean? It says that the total cost is calculated based on the sum of messages used in your organization. Messages, anytime a agent is going ahead and getting information for you, that's a message. That is the message that is talking about. So consumption rates, you will hear the term messages. Now, moving forward, these are the things that I want you to understand. Web grounded, classic answers, generative answers, tenant grounding, and then the autonomous actions. So here's just a quick overview of all of them. It's important to understand which ones fall where, but it's also important to keep in mind these actual message consumption rates, because it's no longer a one-to-one. It's not that when you are asking a Copilot a question or the agent a question, you ask it going ahead and giving you an answer, that's considered as one message. That has changed. So depending on where your data source is, and also depending on what steps it takes, the agent takes to get you the answer, the consumption of the messages changes. So we'll take a look at the low and the high. So web grounded answers. Web grounded answers is used to gather information from entire internet and quickly pull the relevant information. So it'll go and that also means the example that we just saw. We went ahead and uploaded that spreadsheet while in the agent, and the agent started pulling information in. That falls under the web grounded side. Examples over here is PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet, and whatnot. It's information that you're already providing to the agent in a very easy to gather way. So that's called as a web grounded. And so for that one, the consumption is 0. It's as simple as that. Let's go on the other side. All right, there is the tenant graph grounding of new messages. That means you are using the back end platform called Microsoft Graph, which is able to go ahead and do its web interface across all the services in your tenant. That's the beauty of Microsoft Graph. It goes there and keeps authentication, it keeps authorization in mind, all of that magic, plus it gets you all that information. This is also what is leveraged. Microsoft Graph is leveraged to get information from your SharePoint site. So in that way, when you're going through the tenant graphing piece, even though you ask one simple question, but when the agent goes and pulls that save from SharePoint, it's not a 1 message consumption, it's a 30 message consumption. So again, however you react to that, the takeaway is now we know. So based on this information, you make your judgment call. That's the key thing. And then there's also the autonomous actions. I'll just end with that because autonomous actions has had a lot of feedback on that. But I wanted to show you that in same concept is that if you go ahead and have by the way, autonomous actions doesn't mean a discussion. It automatically, autonomously happens in the back end. When that action happens, and if I have time, I'll show you an example.
Is that what they were calling triggers back in like September? The autonomous action?
They did.
Or is that something different?
So these steps are called as triggers and topics. The triggers the triggers basically means what is triggering this autonomous action to happen in the back end?
What starts it?
Yeah. So two
Okay.
examples I can always show you is you've got emails coming into your mailbox. That can be a trigger. You can go and say, hey, there's some people filling out a form somewhere else, a Microsoft Forms form. They're filling it out somewhere else, but I want that to be the trigger to go ahead and have an autonomous action happening in the back end. Something has to trigger it. If the agent is still, triggering based on taking actions based on something, like something has to, knock on that agent's door and say, hey, I want you to do this because now that has happened. That's the trigger piece over here. Topics are again just part of the agent sections to build something. Topics is what gets conversations going, but at least the triggers is the important one. So I'm kind of glad you asked on that part, John.
That's interesting. Like so like Dr. Das here on LinkedIn was like, what is this consumption rate? Like we always, when I first saw 25,000 messages for $200, I was like, okay, that's 25. Like I send it and it sends me text back. Like that's a message, but it's a little bit different than that. There's like a scale here that Abhishek is pointing out that is, it's almost, I feel like it's almost like the concept of tokens, right? Where it's like, hey, this is, this takes more power, or it takes more effort to go get something from like your OneDrive than to like just do like a anonymous web search, So they're basically like, this costs more, messages or more tokens to go do that work for me. So that's why they charge more from your consumption rate. But that's interesting because like I don't think that was the word messages doesn't really seem clear that like, oh, now there's like a conversion rate. So I'm really glad you pointed that out.
It is, but I feel like I'm doing almost a commercial, like, but wait, there's more kind of a thing.
Hold on. Before we this reminds me of collect calling back in the day. When you were at the skating rink and it was time for mom to come pick you up, you would send a collect call and they'd ask you for your name and you'd say, "Mom, come pick me up." And then that was it. So she'd get the call and
we had a baby, it's a boy.
You up and you wouldn't have to pay for it.
But I mean, I came from the Power Virtual Agent side. Before that, I came in from Lewis Language Understanding and Intelligence side. Before that, it was Q&A Maker. But when Power Virtual Agents was there, it had a very interesting licensing plan over there. It said that you were able to have 2,000 conversations. It's per month. That's it, per month. And at that time also, I thought that was a little low because, you could have 2,000 conversations pretty fast. You could, depending on
it could be just one question and the answer, and then you're done. Or somebody could talk to it for like 45 minutes.
But
and it's the same cost.
You know how we say hindsight's 2020. Like now, when I'm coming over here and I'm looking at the messages side, man, I missed that 2,000 conversations because one of the things they clearly stated was you could have a conversation going on for an entire day, and it would still be marked as one conversation. Now, if you do that, man, you will finish your messages just like that. So
it depends on what you're doing in that conversation. So
PVA had its own licensing scheme, and it sounded a little different at that time, but it has changed. So it's just, I want to call that out because there might be people who are coming in from the Power Virtual Agent side and if you still have that 2,000 conversations in your mind, change that, because now it's right down to messages. The whole concept has changed. So what I want to talk about is an example over here. This was actually, people were freaked out a little bit on social media about this, but it's regardless of how your reaction is, at least it was a great example. It's actually, there's a Microsoft documentation which shows about that you could have this high-end scenario as well. Like, there's a low-end, low consumption. This is a high consumption type, right? If you want to go ahead and do a billing event type mapping, if you go ahead and use a current weather, the connection for getting the current weather, that type of connection is of 25 messages. Well, then if you're using any of your knowledge sources, graph grounding type of one, say your SharePoint one, well, that is 30 messages. Or if you just, or if you just went ahead and put it into one of your regular source places, that's 20 messages. So knowledge source can also have this type of consumption. Another example of knowledge source too. If you're going and booking a flight, well, that's 25 messages because you're going and again going through the graph on the back end. And then again, depending on where your knowledge source is coming from, your message consumption changes. So each interaction with an agent might utilize multiple messages types simultaneously. Emphasis on the word simultaneously.
So knowledge is what you put into the knowledge section when you're configuring your agent. Graph grounding is when it like goes out to your OneDrive or something that's not like in that list of knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So if you put like, hey, I pointed it to a SharePoint site. If it goes and looks at the information from that SharePoint site, that's going to cost you 2. But if it goes into your OneDrive, that's going to cost you 30, or it goes to your email or whatever.
The SharePoint one is actually also falling under, because that's the tenant grounding one.
Oh, it's in the tenant.
It is. That SharePoint one is also the tenant ground for messages.
Oh, so knowledge is like it's pre-trained knowledge.
Right.
The PT and GPT. Okay, so if it's like I know about like what the average weather in Orlando is for October, that's only 2 messages. But if it has to go look at like where your conference center is in Orlando because that's in a slide deck on SharePoint, that's 30.
Right.
Okay.
So, Let me go back to our other slide, because this, besides all of this, what I love to go through is one of these examples here. There is the message pack where you can go and buy that, but then there is also the pay as you go. And I have been more and more, I've been thinking, there was actually a whole video a friend of mine, John, and I did together. Joe actually did together. We did a breakdown on this, and we were talking about that. So I'll share a little bit about this. So the message pack, 25,000 messages, no carryover. Examples we all know back in the day, used to buy the minutes. You bought cell phone plans, had minutes for carrying over, or text messages had that too. That was
those were the days.
I know those were the days, but now they don't apply over here anymore. Same thing over here. They don't apply over there. You're whatever you either you use it or you lose it kind of a deal is the message pack. But here is the one about the pay as you go. So right up front, pay as you go doesn't sound like a good idea, because for the same 25,000 messages, if you bought the pack, it's going to cost you $200. But if you went with the pay as you go, it's a 25% increase because you're paying $250. It's a 25% increase. So the math sometimes might sound like, no, this is not a bad idea. It's not a good idea. You're losing money. But hold on to that thought, because I want to give you 2 examples in here. And this is actually, there was a Microsoft documentation which showed these examples, but then there was another documentation which showed completely different examples. Actually, which showed a completely with no example, but they gave us the breakdown cost. So what I did was I just merged the 2. I liked this documentation where it gave the example, but I went ahead and did the math over here to walk you through it. So let's take this one. So you have a customer support agent on your website that answers questions based on customer return policies, blah blah blah. A customer support agent of these types get really high volume. So the average is 900 customers per day. All right. Now, when they are going and pulling the information, see, the average run comprises of 4 classic answers. Classic answers means 1 message consumption. All right. And then 2 generative answers for troubleshooting. So 2 generative means it's going to go ahead and use 2 messages. So all in all, it is going to do a 4 times 1, 2 times 2, 8 messages per conversation, which means 8 times 900 per day, you're already consuming 7,200 messages. So this 7,200 messages per day, when you go with that $200 per message pack, you only get 25,000 a month. Well, this is per day. So you do the math, you multiply that 7,200 times 30, you're going to go ahead and increase that. So again, keep that in mind, that assuming you actually have 900 customer conversations per day. So in that case, the pay as you go, the 7,200, yes, that is still $72 per day, but it works both ways, because it can be on a high side, it can be on a low side. So you might opt, instead of having 800, 900 conversations, across the entire month. It could just be 900 twice a month. So it's like 1,444. So in that case, the pay-as-you-go actually works out a little better because you're not going to lose any of that $200. So that's one example. I'll show you another one. Over here, there is the same thing. You have a tenant Microsoft Graph agent in the Microsoft 365 Copilot Studio. And then this agent answers employee questions based on sales data connected to your Microsoft Graph. Okay, all that. The average run comprises, this is the average run, 4 generative answers and 4 tenant Microsoft Graph grounded messages. So this average is 50 for Microsoft 365 Copilot users and 100 for unlicensed. Okay, that's fine. So the 4 generative answers, well, that's 2. And then the 4 tenant Microsoft grounded, that's 30. So over here now, see, it's low consumption. You are only having few, like the previous one, 900 a day, but their consumption was less. Why? Because the type of data it was pulling, it was a less number of messages. So in this case, even though there's fewer conversations going on, because there are some coming from Microsoft Graph grounded messages, that's 128 messages per conversation. And then depending on how many conversations you have, it's per day. So I made it a little easier by saying, okay, let's say there's 128 conversations per day across 100 customers, per month. You're consuming 12,800 messages. Now, that 12,800 messages, if you went with the message pack, okay, that's fine. You're already consuming it to the 200. But if you did it with your pay-as-you-go, then that 12,800 times 0.01 is $128 for that month. And say you didn't utilize the rest, you are still saving some money because you only spend 128 versus 200.
Yeah.
So, examples, again, I want to leave these by examples. And you kind of see what your scenario is, what your company or what your client is. And you want to get these numbers from them upfront as much. And that's why these examples I'm showing you are extremes. 900 per day support type, like sales support type of a thing, whatever. I mean, not a sales support. The other one was a
like call center.
Call center. Exactly. Thank you. I was trying to get the name out of my mouth. Call center. Well, this is more on the sales side, fewer a month, but the data is coming from different places. And so you need to have a good understanding of those numbers that you have. And that's right. If people's reactions sometimes tend to be a little bit on the negative side, I say my response to that is, I'm sorry, but I don't have enough information to agree with you over there. And if your numbers are high, then yes, in your case, you might want to go ahead and consider this plan versus the other plan. But at least now we know what is going on. You have a really good understanding to go ahead and do some quick math to figure out how much this is going to cost you, so you make some decisions.
So it's about understanding your agent, how it's going to work, and hopefully be able to kind of forecast a little bit of like, what's the cost of this going to be? And Fairy Geek Mother had a great comment on here I just put on screen that's like, our kind of like more pro dev type of agent builders that are going to be building agents that are consumed outside of that $30 a month SKU should know, like, should understand like the capabilities in their app could cost different amounts depending on who the audience is, what kind of answers it's giving, stuff like that. So have you seen or heard anything from Microsoft about like calculators or any kind of like reporting or something like that would be able to help a creator know, hey, you got all these people using your agent and they're using these types of things? I know part of the answer is like a lot of the reporting from Microsoft is pretty immature, right? That's kind of the default answer, but it would be interesting. Andy kind of put a joke in there, but I'm wondering, like, if there's opportunity for like the community to say like, hey, we need to like give people a resource so they could maybe understand the impact potentially of their agent when they go to create that. And do we want to publish it outside of that? Because all of this messages and like the consumption and pay as you go, that's outside of the $30 M365 SKU. Like if you're building an agent, whether Agent Builder or Copilot Studio, and you're going to like give it to people who have a Copilot license, like you're okay. You don't have to worry about, $200 things. This is for the people who are going to use the Copilot chat with like their ESQ and use the included one, right? Or they're going to publish their agent into like WhatsApp or Facebook or something.
So one of the things that's Microsoft is going to provide us is these type of activity places, so you can actually go ahead and see what triggered the agent. Was it something which was autonomous versus you having a conversation? And then based on that, you will be able to see this, which came from a knowledge source versus which one of them was from a flow which was running. This is at least at the level that it is right now to help you do some calculation. This activity map is actually pretty awesome, because we never had this in our virtual agents days, and even in the early iteration of Copilot Studio, it was never there. Now it finally is.
Yeah, you're going to want to understand like that bubble, that's 2. This bubble right here, that's 25. That bubble's 2. This one's 30.
So you see now where this came from. Like, people were showing this because this is actually coming in from that activity place. So the screenshot was actually someone from that activity place. So yeah, I think there's definitely room for improvement over here, John, on like giving us and the total is that many messages, something on the bottom, which is doing the math over there. But
your interaction cost your company $8. I hope you got what you needed.
But so it depends on what part, again, like where your data is and what is your estimated usage of it. Because the people who build these type of agents, they love the Copilot Studio, which used to be called as Power Virtual Agents, because it is so much more easier. And if the low code piece doesn't fall enough for you, heck, you can switch over to Pro Developer just like that. I mean, you can actually start using your Visual Studio, start on a low code and transition that over there. So there's a lot of good that comes along with using Copilot Studio, and it works different ways too. I mean, depending on whether you want to go ahead and go all out by using just existing knowledges, not actually building custom things. So here's actually an example that I have. I went ahead and
just a little bit, Daniel.
Yep, doing that. I actually went ahead and
thank you.
Built this after I did reverse engineering from those agents that we saw in Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. You see how I was able to use that hashtag ideas and everything, and then put the asterisks and all that. This was me learning from playing those things. I actually got ideas and a good understanding of building that. So this instruction that I added was basically, if somebody goes ahead and makes an inquiry of your, using a Microsoft form, then in the back end, I want an agent to autonomously process that information that is coming in, search through the information knowledge that I have provided, and if you get everything, respond back. See over here, that's what I did. Receive the coffee machine inquiry form. This is the form. I'm going to receive it from there. And I specifically give like very specific instructions. Is that receive the coffee machine inquiry form. Well, that's what it is. Coffee machine inquiry form. Be as specific as possible when you're training it. Search your knowledge. Search for answers. Review the questions and search for the answer for other files in your knowledge. In my case, I just uploaded an Excel spreadsheet. So in this case, the knowledge consumption is a little less.
Here's the price list or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And then afterwards, respond with an email. I say, send an email. That's the first thing. Send an email using the Office 365 Outlook, which is also send an email. That's the actual action name. I'll show that to you. See, that's the action name, out of the box action name. So I'm being very descriptive and very specific. Provide detailed information. Send a detailed email providing detailed information about the coffee machine, providing information such as price range, coffee machine names, average cups per week, average espressos per week, and so on and so forth. And then also provide response to no information. So if no information is available, then send an email again using that action, stating no device can be found that matches their requirement. However, they can contact us again for additional information. See, simple, just very descriptive. And that's basically how I created it. So here's my knowledge. Here's my action, and here is my trigger. This is a
Yeah,
fully developed agent that we have. So if we've gone ahead and
that's cool.
leave over here, let's actually do a test. I'll actually go and say my name in this case. I'll just keep it simple.
So
Daniel.
while you're filling that out, Illinois REI was saying, "Hey, I got a bunch of like, IPs and their corresponding device in there, but they're having trouble like getting the right information back." Illinois, you might try making an agent like Daniel did.
Mhm.
Like the only source of knowledge is that IP address, like a spreadsheet, and then kind of tell the agent in the instructions, here's what the columns mean, and I want you to be very specific when you reply. When I ask for an IP, I want you to reply with the device. Maybe an agent with that as your knowledge would help you, Illinois REI.
So I'm going to try this one over here, okay? This is the form that
Okay.
I'm filling out. I'm giving my
And then
name.
also a comment from our friend Michael Greth in SharePoint community. He was talking about like the reverse engineering, and he said you kind of reverse engineered some of the templates and saw like the formatting and stuff. He also pointed out apparently these agents are in a GitHub repository as well.
Mhm.
So maybe I showed kind of the maybe roundabout way of doing it, where like go create an agent, use the template, then go look at the configure tab. You might go look on GitHub, as Michael mentioned, and I don't know, Daniel, did you get it from GitHub or did you do the like looking in the sources?
Looking in the sources. That
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
when you like when we ease of Andy was showing also when you went in the back end, there was the knowledge. Whether remember there was the hashtags used for some places.
Yeah.
It's the sources, it's the out of box
Yeah.
one.
I wonder if there's some of the more stuff over in the GitHub repository. I didn't know that existed, so thanks for pointing that out, Mike.
All right, so I'm going to go and as if end user somewhere went ahead and filled out this form on the intake. Your response has already been submitted. Oh,
Oh, you got like one per person?
I got it turned on. I'll just do it as this one. Oh, the demo gods. No, this was purely my fault. Let me just put this redundant email address over here. I think I pasted that. Nope. Let's see. What is, do you have any espresso machines for less than, I'm going to say, let me just say 300. Okay.
Okay.
Put that in. Okay. Submitted. Already been submitted. What did I do wrong? Let's see. Oh, it didn't save it.
Oh,
yes. Okay.
there.
The content. Yeah, that's fine. That's
okay. Yeah, it was like a security thing.
Yeah. All right. Then this is I copied.
Yeah, you copied the question in.
Question.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna hit submit. This
There we
thing
go.
went through. All right. So now, based on that, there should be first of all the autonomous email that does this. So let's go back to this over here. Going to the overview. The Microsoft form is our trigger. So let's go over here. We'll go over. Any of these triggers are basically Power Automate flows. So when I go and take a look at that directly in Power Automate, pretty neat that it actually keeps track of your environments. And your flow also gets created over there. So it's actually coming in directly. This is how the flow was created. Now, I did tweak it a little bit, but the initial one was a new submit response. I go ahead and does all the actions for everything, the forms, and then it goes and sends the information back. There you go. 48 seconds ago, we just did that right now. So something happened. But let's go back to our Copilot site itself. Let's go to the activity, and there should be 138, 225. This is it. This sounds about right. So
it's already done.
Yeah, it's already done. And so that's what I was telling Andy and John, is that this is the autonomous side in the back end. We never came to the agent to tell it what to do. It automatically triggered because we had said that the trigger is going to be based on the form.
And so if you click into that, now you're getting the map you showed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this tells us what the agent did.
Exactly. So it seems to say no Outlook, but I just want to double check by just actually going in. Let's go to my email address. which I didn't open it up, but let's go back here. I'm going to pull this out, and you will get to see all my other email stuff right here. Inquiry about the espresso machine.
Oh, I'm not seeing that. I think
yeah,
you might just be sharing that one window.
Oh, yeah. Let me open that up and see if I can.
It's all right.
Yeah, close that out. I apologize for any technical issues. I got too many windows open over here.
We like doing this live.
I know. All right, let me go back.
We charge double for this, by the way.
To the activity.
How many messages does this cost?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, here. Oh, you know what? Let me see. Can I pull in now my email address? Yeah, it still doesn't pull that one in. Let me go and try to get that again.
Sure.
Window. Should be. Nope, it's not that. This is the one. Here you go.
Okay. There we
now
go.
We see it. So this email came in automatically. Now, remember, the question I'd asked was inquiry about the espresso machines under $300.
Mm-hmm.
So this was now that agent automatically going and running it. It went in and did the assessment of what the question was, got triggered for Microsoft Form, used the knowledge, which was an Excel spreadsheet. And since we had all the information, it responded back with the email. So it says, Dear Christian, Daniel Christian, thank you for reaching out to us with the inquiry about your espresso machines under 300. Unfortunately, we do not have those under 300 at this time. The lowest price we have is a Barista Lite, which is priced at $699. So if you have any other questions, no further assistance, please feel to contact it. Blah, blah. So
that's so cool, because like rather than if this was just a Power Automate flow, it would have to use a pre-canned response that you put into like either a switch statement or an if-then statement, and it wouldn't have said, well, I found this other one and this is how much it costs. Like a flow, you're not going to have all of those switch cases, in your Power Automate flow, but this, because it's a generative message, it was able to do that extra work of telling you, well, we've got this instead.
And that's the thing. Again,
that's cool.
I come from the PVA side, Power Virtual Agents, where I used to build these agents. We used to call them chatbots. And to replicate this, we would have to create what was called as a topic. Like, what is the topic for this one? And then I would have to say, okay, what was the amount that the person first said? In fact, before we even go there, John, I would need a way to extract the data from that text. The text that came in from that Microsoft form. I would have to figure that out, extract the text. Okay, so there is a dollar amount which is asked over there. Now let me take the dollar amount. Let me go ahead and do a conditional search or data query maybe across that spreadsheet on my data, find something and send it back, and then send it back in this formatted text. I did nothing. The generative AI in the backend did all of that for us. All we did was point it into our knowledge.
Yeah. Here's your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That's the only thing it knows about. And then it just took the request in, knows they're asking for $300. I looked at the spreadsheet. There's nothing there, but this is the lowest price one. So I'll give them something. And it just did that under its own volition instead of, having to instead of having to anticipate every possible scenario, this is just so much easier.
Yep. And so that was the power of the Copilot Studio from that side. But since the discussion had started about going ahead and using the SharePoint piece and just building agents, we started off with of showing the agent in SharePoint. So one of the things that I like to show is that yes, you can have those agents created directly inside SharePoint. But I want to show you this one other example. So let me come over here because there is some good that comes out of that as well. So I'm going to come back into make sure I'm on the right screen here.
There we go. Cool.
There we go. All right. So there is an agent that I have called Receipts. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go into this Receipts agent. Okay. And yep, everything's here. This one is my knowledge is my SharePoint sites. Now, there's a clear difference between this agent over here versus the agent that John showed in his SharePoint site, because that one is an agent directly inside the SharePoint site. In this case, this is a
Yeah.
completely from scratch agent, but we are still leveraging our knowledge as SharePoint. So there's a clear difference over there. Even the license is completely different. Here you have to go with the agent license. And the other, the Copilot Studio agent, which I said the $20 message pack one, that will be the license consumption here. While it's completely different on the M365 side, it's the per user on that side. But things which I like to show is, and let me see if I can go to the demo side. I deliberately do this. I'm going to grab that one because, yeah, right here. But I'll show you this example. I say this website which I have, I am going to now say this URL list I have, because this is an example. I'm going to take that agent and put it on my company website. All right, I can do that. Internet website, not your intranet, which is internal. This is internet type of a website.
Customer facing. Yeah.
Customer facing, yep, on the internet. One of the neat things that is built into the Copilot Studio side, when you use SharePoint, you can't just directly tap into SharePoint from the outside. You've got to go in through this authentication piece. And this is it. This is the authentication. So it says, hello, to be able to help you, I need you to sign in. So I like to show this and emphasize one point, is that there are such good security boundaries already put in that you just don't deliberately go ahead and automatically get the data. No, it knows that, hey, this is SharePoint. So we've got to go through this additional authentication process. So now I go ahead and copy this number here, put that back and paste it. In fact, one additional thing it didn't show over here is I will have to do a multi-factor authentication, because I need to for sure who I am versus, then do the login piece. Since I already had the tab opened up over here, it didn't do it. But if I was purely on the internet, it would actually ask me for a multi-factor authentication to make sure, hey, do you already have access to that tenant / that SharePoint site? And then as you do, authentication goes through, then it starts getting you all the information.
This authentication stuff is, it reminds me of something I forgot to talk about. A really important point to call out here is these knowledge sources, these knowledge that we're putting into these agents, that is not training the agent on it. You're not sending that and storing it in the LLM. We're still using RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. It's just we are specifically pointing it at specific sources to do that grounding. But all of the SharePoint permissions still apply here. So if a person doesn't have access to that file, that agent will not, give them information from that file. It still respects the permissions. You're not teaching the LLM something. And that's like kind of gets to people who are concerned about like oversharing and leaking of data. That's not happening here. We're actually, still respecting the boundaries of 365.
Yeah. I just wanted to press forward with the security piece. I showed you this one thing. Like I've opened up another window. I went in incognito mode just to, do a good representation of out in the internet. And now I grab that URL as well. And I'm going to go and put this over here. In this case, when I go and do log in, it will ask me for that authentication. See, right there. So you have to be an internal person of your company who can go through the Azure AD authentication piece. Then you can go ahead and make sure that you have access to that SharePoint site. So takeaway point over here is that if you are putting in content on your SharePoint, just because you use an agent doesn't mean it's like the back door sort of a thing. No, it's not. All the security still falls in place. You've got to go through this multi-factor authentication in your SharePoint in order for that to work. So I want to call that out. It's still very secure, but that's a judgment call that you got to make. Like, hey, if I put this in SharePoint, my end users are going to go through this multi-factor authentication type. So is that the best option? That's a judgment call that you kind of have to make over there. And I'll quickly just show you this one piece, which is, what was all that authentication piece that was needed. So let me.
Interesting.
It is. And I always look at this as a positive thing. Is it multiple steps? Absolutely. Multi-factor authentication is multiple steps. But that's a good thing because your data is secured in the back end. So if I just come back to our agent which I made over here, for this agent which is going and grabbing the receipts information, if I to go to my settings, I go to my video security. This is the one on authentication. See, it's not the authenticate with Microsoft. It is authentication I am manually setting up, which means I had to go to my Azure AD, register an app for SharePoint, go ahead and get all of this information that I needed to make sure that it will authenticate and verify all the end users for the authentication. The secondary window comes up, authentication. Like these are the things. So a question that comes up to me is that, do we still have to do this for SharePoint? My answer to is this, that where are you using SharePoint for these agents? In the example that we started with the Microsoft 365 Copilot chat and the agents, you're in your tenant, you're in the Microsoft 365. So over there, the agent authentication is automatically happening in the back end. But if you're building a custom agent from scratch to the Copilot Studio side for SharePoint, then this is the authentication piece that you have got to go through, especially if you're going to put it on a public-facing website. So these are the two big examples that I like to show, and in a good way, showing that yes, it still keeps all the guardrails and your securities that you need, but keep that in mind because you will need to have that additional authentication steps over here.
That's cool.
Questions? I can keep going on and on. Copilot agents are fantastic.
Well,
yeah,
this was a pretty deep dive into agents. What I'd like to do now is let's kind of summarize what we've kind of covered up to this point. I think it's important to have a clear distinction of when we would want to stick to prompt engineering versus a Copilot chat agent versus when we would want to have a custom agent in Copilot Studio. And identifying that clear line around the consumption model is going to give our audience an idea of what tool to use and when. I'm going to approach this from the not even low code point of view, the no code point of view. If you are a prompter, if you are curious about prompt engineering, if you want it to be, if you like writing steps within your prompts, you're going to fit right at home, I think, with like the Biz Chat, Copilot Chat version of creating agents. The area where you're going to run into, I think, the consumption model there is if you create an agent and you want to share that with others in your organization that are not Microsoft 365 Copilot licensed. That's when the consumption model is going to kick in for those users to use the agent that you created for them. So I would put that initial agent as a entry-level intermediate agent because it can get pretty powerful. Now, where's the divide? When we're switching over into Copilot Studio, what would be an example of an agent capability that we're only going to get in Copilot Studio that would mean that we need to go and look at that type of licensing for anybody that would potentially be interacting with the agent that we create?
Yeah, I think it's about like segmenting your user base or planning your environment, right? It's, hey, here's our number of users. This number of users we're going to have Copilot licenses. This other set of users, they're not going to have Copilot licenses. We want everybody to consume agents, or we just want this community to consume agents. It's about kind of almost mapping out your environment and like where you want to make these things available, right? And I think that kind of gets into like the topic of like, how do we share and publish these agents, which I know is a topic on our list of items to discuss, which is like, how do I make this stuff available to people? And I don't know, Andy, if you want to lead into like, how do we, maybe to start would be, as an admin, how do I make agents even show for people or not show for people? Maybe that's the base level. And then we can talk, maybe Daniel, about like, how do I publish the agent in Copilot Studio and share it amongst friends and family versus sharing it with everybody in the org versus putting it on a website,
Yeah, so
But
we'll
at
have
the
a little
admin
bit
level,
of
so like, yeah,
we'll
go
have a
ahead.
little sharing and a little admin discussion, and we'll kind of step through some of those
Yeah.
options here.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, like maybe your organization's like, oh my gosh, like what happened? All of a sudden we've got visual creator and we've got prompt coach and everybody's, asking me questions. How do I shut it off? You want to like start with that and talk about the group management?
Yeah, go ahead and bring my screen
Okay,
up.
let me go to your screen. All right, go ahead.
All right. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to head to the admin center. So we'll just open up. Actually, it's on the sidebar. Doesn't matter. I'm going to go into the admin center. Now, I have admin rights in my tenant. You might not. But these are the steps that we're going to need to take in order to start putting some controls around this. From the admin center, I'm actually going to head into, excuse me, I'm going to head into Copilot.
Yeah.
From Copilot, we're going to go into settings. And then a whole bunch of stuff popped up recently. We've got the consumption meter, diagnostic logs, the image generation. We've got Copilot in Bing, Edge, and Windows, Copilot in Edge, Copilot in Teams meetings, data security and compliance extensions, Copilot self-service purchases, and then pin Copilot chat. I'm going to step through a couple of things. I'm going to start with Copilot chat at the bottom. So you have an option to pin Copilot chat on the sidebar for users in your organization. And that's actually what we're seeing right over here. This is available for me, but I'm a licensed user in this tenant. But for the non-licensed users, we have the option to go ahead and pre-pin Copilot chat over there, or we could choose not to pin, but allow the users to be asked if they want to pin it. So it's a level of how much do you want to advertise that Copilot's available to everyone in the organization, and in turn, potentially allowing them to be able to work with agents that are out there. So you're going to have that control. I think that would be one of the first considerations that you probably want to make. Okay. Next up, there's self-service purchase options. So we'll give this just a second to load, but you can allow trials, or you could turn this to do not allow and not allow any self-service. Everything's going to have to go through your enterprise purchasing program. For large enterprises, you're going to want to turn that on, I believe. I'm going to come back to extensions in a moment. Just a couple of other things I want to point out. Image generation. So you would be able to determine whether Copilot and Microsoft Designer can create images, turn that one on or off. There is the ability of your users to use Copilot chat in Bing, Edge, and Windows. There's nothing to toggle on here, but one that you will probably pay attention to is the options in Edge, and that's basically the ability to use Edge in the sidebar and manage that as part of your user experience. Allow Copilot chat to show up in the sidebar there. And then I'm going to go down. If I click on Teams meetings, that's going to take me over to the Teams admin center, and it's going to take me into the specific policies there. I'm not going to do that right now because every time I go to the Teams admin center, it likes to sign me out of all of my tabs, and then I have to sign back in MFA. For the sake of the demo, I'm going to skip that one. But the one that we're really interested in after the preliminaries is the extensions. Click on extensions, and then we can manage who can use Copilot with installed apps and extensions from Microsoft or other providers. As a secondary option, we are going to have to go to the integrated apps and manage that. So we'll do that in just a moment.
Okay.
When you're working with agents, it's currently in preview, right? The default is going to be set to all users. Everybody in the organization, licensed or not, they're going to be able to use Copilot agents. You could set that to no, or you could define specific groups around that. And the groups that you're going to be able to represent are going to be Microsoft 365 groups, either like standalone groups or groups associated with a Microsoft team. You're also going to be able to reference individual users within the organization. You're going to be able to also reference security groups or distribution lists in the organization. So we've got a security group set up John and I are part of that security group. So we're going to be able to potentially work with agents. Now, we've got to go to the integrated apps to configure which apps are going to apply. So it's going to open up this by default. Let users access Microsoft apps in your tenant, yes or no. Third-party apps, you can turn that on or off. Custom apps, you can turn that on or off. And you can see down here that it does have a second area where you can access the same settings that we just saw before. So I'm going to close out of that. And so we can see available apps that are listed down here. Say like I want to search through here. I'm going to search by the word coach. So here's the learning coach. All right. So learning coach is available. All users in the organization can install versus here, Coachello, just some users can install. So we're going to be able to control this in the extension screen, and we can see details associated with it, capabilities, the knowledge. So it's just another way to see kind of what's happening and any actions associated with it. We can see users, and we can specify who would be able to install that. But if we go back to the overview screen, we can see this is currently not deployed. So to make this available, I would need to go and deploy the app. And then it's going to ask me to step through this wizard here, go ahead and deploy the app. Who am I going to send it to? Maybe I do it for like specific groups. Maybe I do it for the entire organization. And then if there's any additional permissions that I want, I would be able to define that, and I would be able to send it out. So I have a granular level of control on the specific agents that we might be deploying, whether it comes from Microsoft, third party, or custom. I can also go back up, and from the available apps, I can switch over to the deployed apps. And in here, I can manage the apps that I've already deployed within the organization. And so I can see whether I did a test deployment. I can see when it was modified, the status. And then I'm going to be able to edit the users that are associated with that. Now, in doing this, in working with this, John and I ran into a nuance that we thought was we needed to make sure that we brought to attention. I added us to the security group for the Microsoft 365 Copilot licensed agent users because I wanted the non-licensed users to not be able to use the agents. So I added John and I to basically the security group, set us as the owners, deployed everything, and all of my coaches disappeared. Poof, gone. What happened? I set John and I as the owners. We needed to be set as members as well. By adding us as members of that group in addition to the owners, then it lit up, and it took about 5 minutes for the agents to start showing back up. But then the agents were then visible for us again, and should be controlled underneath that security group. So those are a couple of the settings that you can apply globally. It took me a couple of weeks to learn this globally to be able to control agents for non-licensed users in addition to your licensed users in your Microsoft tenant.
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing. Yeah, right before we got started, we were like, "Oh no, I can't see agents." So you need to be a member of that group, not just an owner. So that was an interesting one. Yeah, so that's showing like, all right, maybe you want to like make agents available to a pilot group, create a security group for your pilot users, give them this right in the extensions, and then you also have the per agent controls in integrated apps. And can you go back to integrated apps real quick for me?
Yeah.
So go to available apps and then type Neuro, Nuero. So I deployed that neurodiversity checker agent and I published it. This is where you would be able to check that. So this is like an in-house developed app with Copilot Studio. It was published to the organization. This is where I would be able to look at this as an admin and see like under details, what are the capabilities? Also, what are the knowledge sources that John added? So like, I go into knowledge. John pointed it to like a shared documents folder in the M365 deep dive. So that's how I can, see what it's available to do and all of that. I think if you go into users, will it show like, Yeah, so anybody can install this app. I could also, again, if I wanted to control just this app to a pilot group of users, I could have like, all right, I've got 30 users who are doing agents, and I've got 10 users who are testing this one agent. You could put the smaller group in here and control just that one agent's visibility to people as well. So it's nice. There's good granularity there, in my opinion, to be able to like roll this out in a structured way. Right. So from here, do you want to show maybe Daniel, like how would we go in and share an agent versus how would we publish the agent to the organization?
Yep. Let's see that. Jump right in.
Okay.
From the Copilot Studio side, it actually is a little bit easier.
Okay.
So let me share my screen. That's the one. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
So, but when it comes to the license assignment, remember this is per agent type of a license. So end users, we don't have to go and give them each of the Microsoft 365 Studio one. No, that's not required if you're going this M365. The Copilot Studio side. There is a license, which is it's not so much as a cost piece, but it says Copilot Studio agent user. That needs to be turned on at the user level. That's still the case. There's no dollar amount to that. It's just something that needs to be turned on for the users. But that's if the agents are used internally. But here's something, from the technical side, John, this is what you were talking about when we were building agents in SharePoint. This one actually has that publish button. So I could start building the agent for months and months, but nobody would even notice it or see it because I'm still in the build phase. I'm still in the design phase. What you have to do first is go ahead and publish it first. It'll go through a process. Sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes it takes a while. You can step away. It'll tell you when it's done. But after that, there are these channels. So you tell where is it that you want to deploy to. If it's going to be in Teams, or if it's going to be on a custom website, you click on the custom website. It actually gives you a full HTML. So I have done examples where I've actually built a full standalone agent, taking care of its license and everything. Then I came over here, copied that, and then embedded that on the SharePoint site. So it was a purely customized agent, but I just put it in SharePoint. So that way it's this one central place for people to go and see. So you can go ahead and do it that way. In the app itself, when you go ahead and go to the going back quickly. In the when you go directly in the app itself, when you're going ahead and doing the publishing, there is also the place to go ahead and do share. Only people have access to this data connections will use. That's the place where you can go ahead and actually do the sharing of the agent if it's going to be an internal one. That's the place where you can go and assign that. So here's a great place to apply your security groups, match it to a location. So the example I just said, if you're going to put it in that SharePoint site, well, then match it to all the people who have access to that SharePoint site. And from that standpoint, it is important to know that only people who have access to this agent's data connections will be able to use it, or edit it, stuff like that. So sharing the agent, but that's it. It's a lot more easier and simpler on the Copilot Studio side when you're building the standalone agent, and you've got that flexibility, whether you are sharing it with end users to just use it, or if you're sharing it with other people to help you co-build it. You've got that flexibility all over here. And you can deploy it from either one of those places.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of a difference as we think in like enterprise technology levels, is like there's the concept of sharing and the concept of publishing. So maybe like get your citizen developers and your pro devs to start thinking in terms of like sharing as friends and family. I want to show this to you. I want you to try it out. I want you to like use it and give me feedback or maybe help me develop it, versus I'm ready to publish this to, 100,000 people and everybody's going to use it as a product. That's where you start getting into like, all right, this is going to be in the integrated app section. We're going to control access to it, stuff like that at like an admin level versus, hey, let's just put this in Teams and let's see if there's any value to it before we go with a broad rollout. Yep. So Yeah, that's a really good demo. I appreciate it. And I think that also gets a little bit into governance as we, get to the last 3 minutes here of our time. Um, I think you guys want to start thinking about as you build things like the availability of building, right? And I kind of picture in my mind a mountain of like at some point you want people to be innovative. You want to make things available to people to build and be able to solve problems with agents. And maybe you've got this citizen dev community at the base of the mountain. Maybe you want to allow people to do like SharePoint agents. Maybe they use the agent builder. Maybe they use Copilot Studio and they can share with small groups of people. When you get to that publish phase where you're going to click publish and it's going to send a request to the admin in the integrated apps area, that might be where you want to start thinking in an enterprise level. What do we want to do as far as approval process for, you know, I need to install some kind of process for like, why are you the person to make this app? Do you have more than one owner? At what point are we going to get rid of this app if nobody's using it, this agent, things like that. So start to think in terms of like designing your environment for how you're going to deal with the onslaught of people who are making things and they think it's the coolest thing in the world and they want to share it with everybody. I would think upfront about that. And I see a lot of organizations build like really interesting power apps and things like that to kind of ingest the requests of publishing stuff and dealing with it so that even if the tools aren't there from Microsoft, I would encourage you try to write down, the justification for why somebody made the agent, who's going to own it as a backup, what the support model is. At least write that down somewhere so that you're not just like having to clean up a huge mess, 6 months later. So that's just my plea as an enterprise guy,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this was a very good topic. This definitely got me out over my skis a little bit. I really
That is
appreciate your
the
time, Daniel.
second time I've heard that phrase today.
Oh, out over my skis. Yeah. I'm definitely out of my comfort zone, a little bit. Like I did a lot with Q&A Maker a couple years ago. I kind of like, I didn't really do anything with PVA or Power Virtual Agents, and now we're back to Copilot Agents and it's like the new hotness. And I learned a lot today from you. I really appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. This has been really educational, and I'm looking forward to learning more with you for some of our upcoming workshops and with John for some of our upcoming workshops. Any shameless plugs you guys want to give here as we are starting to wind it down?
I need to find one. I don't have the slide to show, the thing, but Andy and I are going to be at M365 Collaboration Conference the first week of May. We are doing a workshop on all things Copilot and planning out your environment and things like that. We are also doing a breakout session on Loop and Whiteboard and kind of like bringing all the modern collaboration elements together with the power of Copilot to kind of help you give that lift. That's going to be in Vegas the first week of May. And then Andy and Daniel, you guys are doing your events like kind of more in the summer, right? Or is it earlier than that?
In June.
June, okay.
Yeah, in June. Andy and I are doing a workshop on similar. It's all things Copilot, but specifically Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Studio.
Okay.
We'll deep dive in it because even though we spend 2 hours over here, him and I are going to go back and forth on the usage of Copilot across Microsoft 365 side, not just the way in Microsoft 365 chat, but individual ones like Excel, Word, different things. And we geek out a little bit at one time, have crack some jokes, whatever. We actually we make it a lot of fun where people like, okay, why are even humans involved over here? We can do everything automatically. It gets a little fun over here sometimes. But then give that tipping point. Is that okay? If you can't do all of that here, let's try to do it in the Copilot Studio. So that's the one that we'll be working together. This is the one is in Seattle. So
okay,
it's the Microsoft 365. No, this is the TechCon.
TechCon, right?
It's
okay,
TechCon 365 PowerCon. It's
Yeah,
fun.
let me bring that up on screen for everybody so we can give you that plug here. So it's TechCon. Oh my gosh, I can't click the link. But it's TechCon365.com. I'll just bring that up on my screen here for us, guys. So and it's the one in June. If you look up on here, you'll be able to go to the Seattle, Washington one, and it's
agenda
it's
at
this
the
guy
top.
right here. So agenda. Sorry to be doing this on the fly, guys. So Daniel Glenn, Daniel Christian, here we go. I mean, Daniel Glenn is great, a fantastic speaker as well. Check out his session. But
Use our promo
here's
code. Our promo code,
Yeah.
Daniel and Andy. We'll post that in our social medias.
There you go. Okay, yeah, you can post that on social media. So there's the workshop that they're going to be doing. That is from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, June 23rd. And then for us, the
These
collab
workshops
conference
are like 3.5 deep dives in a single day. But we try to give you some hands-on and let you go through some exercises with us and go into some more predefined demos as well.
Yeah. And then here's the one that me and Andy are doing in May. This will be on May 9th from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Sign up for this one. It's M365 Community Conference in Vegas. So that'll be fun. This is I haven't been back in like 5 years to the M365 Community Conference. And I need to get to a TechCon conference because you seem like you guys have an awesome time there.
It's a really fun conference.
Yeah.
Seattle tends to be one of the larger attended TechCon conferences. Great technical audience, but any of the TechCon events are great. I've been speaking there for 10 years now. It's a great conference.
That's cool. There they are side by side for you guys. Awesome. Well, I guess that kind of ends it, right?
Want to give a big thank you to Daniel. That was an awesome deep
Yes.
dive. Really appreciate you being here and diving into it. We'll look to have you on the show again in the future. I know we got some more topics that we want to follow up on. We did put Daniel's YouTube channel in the chat. That's on both LinkedIn and on YouTube. Follow Daniel. He's got a ton of subscribers, weekly videos, tons of content. He's very dedicated to it, but he's awesome. Great friend. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thanks. And if they don't invite me, I know exactly where Andy lives. He lives 20 minutes this way. So I can,
is the camera near? Because you might be pointing in the wrong direction.
It's that way. I know exactly where you live. 20 minutes away from each other. So
nice.
Thanks, guys. This was fun. And I like the synergy between both the 365 Copilot and then the tipping point. I think that was the key one.
Yeah. Awesome, guys.
Well,
cool.
On that
thanks again.
Note, thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks for the awesome crowd and participation we had in the comments. We will see you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good weekend. Bye, guys.